Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining me this next hour, for being here today. You're listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks on Transcendental Tuesdays, if you're listening live, here on 12radio.com, and we're also simulcasting on my YouTube channel, which is the same name as the show, Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. We are changing the way that we think about and listen to the world. To me, that's the purpose. Take in the information, absorb it, have experience, and then how does that change what we think we're doing in our lives? So that's what I always like to say. That was a tagline we used on 12 Radio more than a decade ago, changing the way we listen to the world. And this is March 17th, 2026. So happy St. Patrick's Day. May you have the look of the Irish today. And on today's show, we're not really going to talk about St. Patrick's Day, but we are going to look at the week ahead. I'm an astrologer, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to look and see what is going on with those planets, the cosmic dance. So once again, we've got this really amazing, outstanding week. I know that is just starting to sound like hyperbole, but oh my gosh, so much going on this week. And maybe that's just a sign of the times. We have a new moon in Pisces on Wednesday, March 18th. That's tomorrow. The spring equinox is on Friday. That's when the sun enters the sign of Aries. That's also the beginning of the new astrological year. Now, and for many of us too, Mercury ends a 3-week retrograde in Pisces on Friday. And when I said for many of us, of course it ends for the whole world. But for a lot of people, they really want to acknowledge the end of that retrograde. And if anything, acknowledge it and recognize it for the lessons that have been learned. Now, by Friday afternoon, this is what a lot of people are going to be thrilled about. By Friday afternoon, we will officially be in a retrograde-free zone with all the planets moving in direct motion until May 6th. That's when Pluto is going to turn retrograde in Aquarius. And of course, all of those outer planets, those planets that are farthest from the sun, they go retrograde every single year, and they do it for 4-5 months at a time. So, if you like those periods where we don't have any retrogrades, it's going to be the next, month, 6 weeks, however long that is, until May 6th. Now, the weekend forecast, I want to kind of bring that up because this is a kind of action-packed show as usual. I've just got more material than we can ever really discuss. And so I'm going to pick and choose and prioritize. But I really want to call out this next weekend because there's going to be a lot of energy on Saturday because the planet Mars, the planet of inspiration, motivation, and literally just our vitality, it's going to trine, meaning being in a very positive aspect, to Jupiter, the biggest planet in our solar system outside of the sun. So that's a very energetic day on Saturday. So I just want you to notice that, something going on there. Mars is actually in Pisces and Jupiter's in Cancer. It's a water energy. So that also might mean tidal waves of emotion going on with Saturday. But I just want you to keep it in the back of your mind. You don't have to do anything about it. Just know it. But also, and I hope that I do get the chance to talk about this a little bit, on Sunday, the sun, which astrologically represents our ego and our sense of individual self, it's going to be sitting right in the same astrological space, one Aries, with Neptune. Neptune is the planet of dreams and creativity and imagination and spirituality. That's a really, really important thing when the sun joins one of those outer planets. So and in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and just let the cat out of the bag, just in case we don't get to it. The reason it's so important, or that I'm really paying attention to it this year, is not only because it's just phenomenal, especially if you want to be a creative person, or, if you're diving into something spiritually, if you're really looking at your intuition, if you're just looking at something, just a hobby or even your job and how to bring in more magic. Well, the sun and Neptune come together. But this is what's really cool, is that this hasn't happened in Aries for more than 160 years. Because see, for the last 13, 14 years, Neptune has been in Pisces. So every time the sun came along and joined Neptune, it was in Pisces, which was wonderful. But now this is a whole new energy. And Aries is a sign of action. So this is going to be, especially different than what we've been used to for the last 14 years. And there again, it hasn't happened in decades that the sun has joined Neptune in the sign of Aries. And by the way, that kind of brings me to, I always like to call out Mark's Power Peak, which is that online digital newsletter. You can get it every single week. You can subscribe for free by going to 12house one to listen.com, and just find the link that says Mark's Power Peak. It is free, and you're not going to end up on any other email list, but you will get a link every Saturday night, and it's going to take you to that newsletter. And the reason I call it out, many reasons. There's lots of articles in it that are very metaphysical, or they're about tarot or I Ching or feng shui, you name it, lots of other things. But I write a column that is called The Week Ahead. And it's going to literally say every single day where the moon is, what the planets are doing. So when we don't cover all those details in this particular show, or if you don't hear it on some other show or some other podcast, go to Mark's Power Peak, check out The Week Ahead, and it's going to give you an idea about what is going on every single day of the week. All right, so let's get on with it, because we do have a lot to cover today. And first, though, I do want to call out and say, hey, we do have a chat room over on YouTube. And thank you, Leslie. You're almost always the first person in the chat room. Thank you for coming. And I see Paula. Hey, thank you for being here. And a number of other people coming into the room today. So thank you. I don't always get a chance to go over there and answer everybody's questions. Sometimes I'll do it really quickly when I can. So, but please, thank you for being over there today. And I'll try to pay attention as much as I can to the people coming into the room. But yeah, people are saying happy spring, and that's it. On Friday, happy spring. So thanks. And let's get back to what we're talking about with the cosmic dance for March 16th. And as I said, I know you just kind of get tired of it, because every week it's like, oh my God, it's another outstanding week. But once again, it truly is. And we are going to get to that point. Maybe I'm not going to make any promises, but where I'm going, okay, there's not a whole lot going on this week. But this week, there's a whole lot going on. And I also want to say that it's easy sometimes, especially when we have so much fire energy, so much of the fire element that is very strong and willful and unpredictable and fast moving, that we just get overwhelmed. And so what I want to say is, I know I get really excited about this stuff. I mean, I truly do. I just love it, and I get very excited. But in your life, just take in whatever you hear on the show or whatever you're reading astrologically, and know that you are in charge of how that energy is really going to be in your life. And so if you hear 10 things during this show, maybe there's just one that kind of resonates. Maybe there's just one that kind of strikes home. But, don't just try to, in the same way that I'm saying, this really hits me or this really hits me, just see what really hits you, what resonates with you. And also, I would remind you, for so often I look at the energy ahead and I'm kind of predicting, or I'm kind of looking and going, how's that gonna land? But it's in retrospect that I learn so much, and then I go back and I look and I go, that's how that new moon developed, or that's how that worked out for me or for somebody I know. And so, what? I guess what I'm saying is, with all this energy, just take it easy. Just sit in it. And you don't have to do anything. The best thing is to just be that neutral observer. And then you're going to make the right decision in the right timing. All right? So, in this outstanding week where a lot of stuff is going on, let's just look at these dynamic changes. And the one thing that really struck me about this week is it starts with all kinds of endings. And then it ends with all kinds of new beginnings, which is the circle of life, right? I mean, things develop, they have a lifespan, then they come to completion, and eventually they dissolve. And the moon is a constant reminder of this process, because, if you watch the moon at all, we witness it every single month and every single day as we watch the moon. For a while during the waxing cycle, it gets a little bit bigger every single night, because it's literally not absorbing the light of the sun, but it's reflecting it, right? It's reflecting back to us, and that's why we see it. Then as it hits that full moon, every single night, it seems to diminish a little bit. it wanes and the light just gets dispersed every single night until we get to the new moon. So, in many ways in our lives, we see this every single day. And if we're watching the moon, then this becomes a process that it's just so ingrained. It's the way things work on this planet. It's just an obvious example. So, what we've got going on is that the sun is going to meet up with the moon at 28 Pisces tomorrow night. That's what makes it a new moon. And here again, if you're not listening live, that's Wednesday, March 18th. So that's a new beginning. But what have we got in these 2 days? If you think about Monday and Tuesday, and actually tomorrow, what's been going on? Well, that's where we're releasing that light. And for many people, that becomes a time when they are releasing. They're clutter clearing, or they're looking forward, like, what do I want to do next? I need to clean this table off. I need to clean, I just need to simplify my life. So when you have that, that's true. And for people who are really sensitive to those moon cycles, I mean, especially people that have a lot of water in their chart, the Pisces and Scorpio and Cancer, they're very in tune usually to the moon cycles. So they may be particularly going, I really am just in a phase of I'm being quiet or introspective, or I'm releasing. Well, that's what I mean by endings. And of course, we're in the winter season that is quickly coming to a close on Friday with the equinox coming. So, that's why I said we start this week with endings, and then we go out of this week with all these new beginnings. So let's take a little bit deeper look into the new moon that's happening on Wednesday the 18th. And when we look at the chart, once again, it contributes to why I think this is like such an outstanding week. Because when I looked at the aspects, when I looked at how, in an astrology chart, I'm looking for those relationships between the planets and the luminaries, the sun and the moon. And this particular chart, oh my gosh, there's a very strong supporting cast of planets in relationship to both the moon and the sun as they sit at 28 Pisces. Now, I think this is a good thing because Pisces moons are dreamers. This is the embodiment of unformed creativity, just waiting for a plan, for a vehicle, for a strategy to manifest. I mean, ultimately, really, new moons in Pisces are just dreamers. They're living on another planet. They're just out there, if you want to think about it that way. It's pure imagination and creativity and spirituality, too. And this new moon cycle, though, is infused with all of the energy of these planetary interactions. So now I'm going to describe them to you. But really, when I looked at them, I go, you got to be kidding me, the planets that are involved in this particular new moon. Because, of course, sitting at 28 Pisces, Neptune and Saturn, which recently moved into Aries right next door, they're sitting within a few degrees of the sun and moon. Now, that brings me to something I want to address, which is called out of sign conjunctions. Because you might look at it and you go, well, how can the moon and the sun be conjunct? That means sitting right with. How can they be conjunct when the sun and moon are in Pisces and Saturn and Neptune are sitting in Aries? Well, if you look at it, and, at some point, maybe we are going to do, this show visually, with a camera, and I can show you some charts and that sort of thing. But if you look at that chart, they're just a few degrees away from each other. They're sitting right next door to each other because there's only 1 or 2 degrees that are separating 28 Pisces from 1 degree of Aries. So, in effect, Neptune and Saturn are sitting right there with the sun and moon. And when you think about that chart, it's an imprint for the next 29 and a half days for the lunar cycle. So mathematically, there they are, just a few degrees apart. And they're trying to figure out how they can blend and join their energies. The sun and the moon together, and Saturn and Neptune. And here again, when we think about conjunctions in astrology, they're not positive or negative. And they're very much based on the planets that are involved. So, do we like the Saturn sitting with the moon? Do we like Saturn sitting with the sun? And same thing with Neptune. And it can manifest in a million different ways. And I like it for the discipline because here's the sun and moon in the most imaginative sign possible, right? Well, but you add Saturn and Neptune and Aries, and what you've got is action. So maybe those dreams that on previous new moons, we just go, oh yeah, I just had this fantastic idea, this fantastic vision of what could happen, but then I never did anything about it. Well, this time, Saturn and Neptune, they're alert and they're going to go, okay, how can we put this into motion? How can we carry this through? I've got the courage. I've got the motivation. I've got what it takes to make this happen. So, see, that's significantly different than any kind of new moon in Pisces that we've had for a long time with Saturn and Neptune sitting in Aries. And they're kind of like siblings. They may be different. They may have various motivations, strengths, and weaknesses, but they're trying to figure out how to work together. They're trying to figure out how to combine forces. And yeah, there's probably going to be a little bit of tension or a little bit of fighting, trying to figure out how they put all that energy together, but they're creating something between them. And so I think when we look at this particular new moon, we're looking at extraordinary creativity and the motivation and discipline to make things happen. Now, let's take it a step further. When we look at this new moon, we also can see that it's amplified. The energy is totally amplified because the sun and moon are making a positive sextile connection with Uranus. Uranus is sitting over at 28 Taurus, just 60 degrees away. And so that's a very positive connection. You know what Uranus does? Uranus is the planet of breakthroughs and the planet of awakenings. So even if Saturn and Neptune weren't sitting there, oh my gosh, this is an exciting energy to have Uranus infusing its awareness and its sense of awakening into the new moon. And here again, you have to add that to the idea that Saturn and Neptune are sitting there. I mean, it becomes more complicated, obviously, but to have Uranus there, big deal. Then, if you look further, you're going to see that they also make sextiles to Pluto, which is a planet of transformation. So, we've got what I would call the four heavy hitters in the zodiac: Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto are all involved in very positive connections to the sun and moon at this time. So this is pretty darn exciting. Those four outer planets are all connecting in positive ways to the sun and the moon. So, I mean, like, what's not to like there? I mean, I just think so often, new moon, another new moon. And it's like, does anything really change? Does anything really happen? Well, no, our lives don't work that way. But sometimes there's a standout. And I really don't think it's a stretch to believe that with those planets involved with this particular new moon, we're almost guaranteed that it's going to be very interesting and dynamic. And by dynamic, I really mean the definition of that word, changing. Something very specific happens. Now, we may not even know for a month, for 2, for 3. We may look back on it and go, oh, yeah, that was that new moon cycle in Pisces with all those planets. So there again, just soak it in. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. That's it. And if any of those things, or if you think, hey, yeah, Uranus is really my planet, I really want to attach to that kind of energy this time, do it. But just recognize this really is a very interesting new moon. And yet, there again, just do what you usually do or be the observer. Just pay attention. And it's also interesting to me that Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. So here we have the ruler of Pisces, also that planet making a strong connection to the sun and the moon by that conjunction. So that's another link that we've got going on there. So this is what I'd say. Astrologically speaking, and of course I look at a lot of new moons and I have for 40 years, this is not your typical new moon. This one, this one deserves some attention. It's different. So the other thing I want to bring out that kind of I think plays a little part here is that Venus, now we haven't mentioned her. She's sitting in Aries, but she's sitting further along. Venus is actually 15 Aries. So she's not like right there at the very beginning of the sign, but she will be in a perfect square to Jupiter during the new moon. Jupiter's sitting over in Cancer. And that square, a square always means it's like, cars at a four-way stop. That means that there's a tension, that somebody has to stop and somebody gets to go. We have to take turns. So it almost always creates a situation in our life, or it manifests in our life as something where we know it's this or that. Maybe we have to choose, or maybe we have to prioritize this and that. And when I look at it, Venus, that is what we find attractive. And what do we find attractive right now in Aries? Independence, going after what I want, being courageous, taking a chance, taking a risk. But Jupiter sitting in Cancer's much more conservative. And I mean that doesn't want to take a risk. Cancer's saying, what makes me safe? What makes me feel secure? Cancer is also the sign of home and family. And so what you have here is that it could be that you've got a dream. It could be that there really is something you really want to do. It's like, I want to move across the country. I want to move out of the country. Or I just want to do something daring and dynamic. Maybe I've been thinking about it for a very long time, but I know that my family's not going to like this. Or I know that my particular group of friends or my tribe or whatever, this other part of me that those people represent is going to feel like, oh, I'm taking second place. When I talked about it's about priorities, and sometimes it really is, okay, now I'm going to prioritize my family, and then tomorrow I'm going to prioritize myself, right? That's a simplified version of it. But just recognize that in the midst of all this unbelievably motivating and wonderful positive energy, there is this little scratchiness. And that's Venus squaring Jupiter saying, you know what? How do I really make myself abundant? How do I please my family? How do I please my friends? How do I, really have those wonderful, loving relationships and supportive relationships? But you know what? I got Venus in Aries, and I gotta get out there and kick ass. I gotta do something. There's something I want to do, and I can't wait for everybody else to give me permission, or for everybody else to say, yeah, it's time to do it. It kind of reminds me, this just kind of popped in my head. Years ago, it was like right around 2000, I just got this notion in my head. I really, really wanted to go to Bali, the island. Well, for the most part in my life, I had not traveled. I had not gone to Europe. I'd gone to Mexico a couple times, but truly, I hardly ever went anywhere very far. But I really wanted to go to Bali. And I also kind of had a pattern that, it was wherever my family or my friends wanted to go. I would join them, or maybe I'd instigate, but usually I just went where other people want to go. And I just thought, you know what? If I wait for a friend or for a family member or somebody else to go, oh yeah, I'll go to Bali, it's never going to happen. So very impulsively, I just bought a ticket and went. And to this day, I kind of can't believe I did that, because even my family, they're like, you're going where? You're going to Indonesia alone? And even in fact, I should go back and look at my chart and remember exactly what was going on for me. But that's Venus in Aries. It was just like, you know what? I can't wait for permission. I can't wait for all this other stuff. And I ended up, by the way, it was a life-changing trip. I had the most fabulous time, bonded with a few people in Indonesia. And, but like I said, when I look back on it, I go, yeah, what made me do that? But and I'm not saying that we have that strength of energy right now going on with Venus square Jupiter, but I want you to know sometimes that's what it is. I've got to strike out on my own, even though it may make my family uncomfortable, or even though it's not really my pattern. It's not something that makes me feel safe and secure. Venus is going, I'm not interested in safety and security in Aries. I'm interested in courage. I'm interested in having a new experience. So that too could be something going on. And I hope I'm not inspiring you to do something crazy, but It's that kind of energy too that is part of this new moon. So, you know what? Maybe it's something much, much smaller, but if there's something on your agenda, if there's something in your heart that you go, you know what, I just keep waiting for permission, then you know what? I don't think you're going to be waiting for permission anymore, especially with Uranus involved with this moon, because this is a new moon that is a dreamer, but she's quickly finding her voice and looking to take some action. It is like there's a part of us that's just waking up. We're waking up and yearning for something within us. And I would call it reunion. And when I say reunion, it's like maybe we're trying to get more in touch with our creativity, with our spiritual selves. Maybe it's another person or a partner, somebody already in our life. Maybe it's a partnership with nature or life in general. But I think we're trying to find ourselves in the big picture. So we are trying to reunite with something within us that makes us feel truly us, who we are. So some of the images and concepts also for this moon is, we're just throwing out some ideas. It's about seeing a vision for your life, or maybe for the world, but certainly seeing a vision for your life and where you fit in, and bringing this picture into focus, saying, how am I going to live my vision? Because once again, that Aries energy says, I don't want to just dream about this. I want to act on this. So that's what we've got going on inside of it. So as we see this bigger picture, or we're looking for the connection between all things, those strings of attachment, so to speak. What do they look like? How are they working for us, and how are they working against us? And or how are we pulling in those people, those experiences that we want to have in our life? So I feel like we're dreamers on this moon, but these dreamers are also saying, I want to take it out of the realm of dreaming. I want to create something. I want to actually do something. And so we'll see that I want to dance with this creativity. I want to create some evolution or change in my life. I'm a student of life. I want to get out there and enjoy it, not just talk about it or not just dream about it. So, those are some of the images that you may be feeling all week long and into the next month as this unfolds, but also as it plays back and forth with the idea of the spring equinox. We're going into a new astrological year. I think it's a wonder. In fact, the image that keeps coming to me is like the yellow brick road. It's like this new moon is paving the yellow brick road for this adventure that we want to go on for this new astrological year. So let's get to the spring equinox, which is what's going on Friday. That is the 20th of March. And when the days are equal in the spring equinox is when the sun moves into Aries. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, which is why we call it the astrological new year. And what's so exciting as we look at this is it's not just the sun that's going to be in Aries. As of that day, we're going to have the moon in Aries, because remember, it was in Pisces when it was full, but now it only stays in a sign 3.5 days. So it's going to slip into Aries. So there it is on the solstice sitting in Aries. Venus, Saturn, Neptune, and the asteroid Chiron, they're all sitting in Aries. Now, once again, that's not necessarily true every single year. That's a lot of planets to be in Aries on the spring equinox. And here's the other thing. This is a picture that's going to continue. I remember several months ago, I was looking at something. It must have been December or January. I was looking at something and I was following a particular planet. I went, oh my God, look at April. I mean, it absolutely caught my eye because of how many planets are grouping together in Aries in April. So this isn't just this week on Friday. This picture is going to continue with all of this fire Aries energy in April. Venus is going to move on. Now, that's true. Venus is there now, but she's going to move out. But a month from now, by April 15th, the moon is going to be back in Aries again, because, of course, it takes about, a month to get back. But Mars and Mercury are also going to be in Aries. which is phenomenal. And in fact, I kind of laughed. In fact, it probably was Mars that I was really following and looking to see where it was going and what it was doing. Because remember, Mars takes 2.5 years to go around the chart. So, see, Mars is not necessarily anywhere close to the sun when you look at a chart. Now, you're always going to find Mercury and Venus pretty close to the sun. They never get too far away. But Mars can be anywhere. But I think it's funny because Mars rules Aries. And it's almost now, I know I'm just making this up. It's just like one of those fantasies. But it's almost as if Mars is going, oh my God, there's a party in Aries. And that's my sign. I got to be there too. So this year, Mars is going to be there, and with Mercury and the whole rest. So during a lot of April, we're going to have like as many as 6 planets sitting in Aries. So, what I'd say is get ready for a significant shot of adrenaline, because remember, this is high energy. It's like, hey, I got to, I'm the shining knight in armor. I got to go off and fight some dragons. I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. There's, life is waiting for me. This is high energy. And think of it too. What is springtime? Well, spring is when the earth literally wakes up from her long winter hibernation. Now, depending on where you live, that may not seem exactly true, but metaphysically or mythology wise, that's what's happening. And in many parts of the world, it's Earth. I mean, that is what's going on. The long winter hibernation is coming to an end. And Aries has to have that very flashing energy to motivate and inspire that kind of force, to literally get the sap running through the trees, to wake up the earth, to wake up the plants, to wake up everything and say, hey, it's time. It's time. Quit the hibernation, let's go. So that's why that Aries is so energetic and assertive and direct and enthusiastic and curious and impatient. It is the essence of spontaneous and courageous passion. And like I said, that's what it takes to wake up the earth. That's a pretty amazing energy that gets those roots to all of a sudden wake up and start pushing, outwards and upwards. And I don't know about you, but I can see a weed grow 2 or 3 inches, maybe 5 in just a day or two. It's unbelievable how fast they can come up through the soil. And obviously I didn't plant those seeds. They were willing volunteers. But boy, that sun is waking them up and they are coming up. So that's the way it is. And Aries is ruled by Mars. So when you think of everything that has to do with Mars, the planet of action and inspiration and vitality, the ability to recover, that physicalness of our nature, it's moving out of, eventually it's going to move out of Pisces and into Aries. But regardless, it is the ruler. So in fact, in that sense, it could be a little slow since Mars is still sitting in Pisces. It's still dreaming, but eventually it's going to move. But we're feeling inspired. We are feeling fearless. Truly. So what I'd like to do next is just spend a little bit of time, hopefully not too much, but you know how I love to talk about people that have the kinds of aspects in their chart that we're talking about. And the reason is because to me, this grounds the energy. It brings it alive. When I think about people and I look at things that they've said, then it's like they're talking, I always say it, they're talking their charts. They literally are. And so what you're going to notice in a number of these quotes is I was interested in how many times I found quotes where they're talking about being foolish. And I say that because here again, Aries says, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to try this. Yeah, I'm riding my bike on top of the fence and maybe I'm going to fall off. We'll see. They talk about the importance of taking a risk, and who cares if you look foolish? What does it matter? And I thought, oh, that is interesting that's a word that keeps coming up with people that have the sun in Aries. They're talking about, foolishness, but also there's an edginess to so many of these quotes, just this edginess that you see in that Aries that says, you know what, I'm not here for you to like me. It's great if you do, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to make a splash. I'm here to change consciousness or to to do something. And there has to be a little edginess to me. And maybe that means I'm going to make some enemies along the way. Now, I'm not saying Aries has enemies, but Aries is just, it's that little, I always think of Aries as the little kid with the baseball cap, and he's just running, he's just doing his thing. And so here are some of the quotes. The first person I chose is Betty Davis, the actress. And of course, you would say she was kind of a crusty old dame or something, an incredible actress. She had Sun and Saturn in Aries. Now think about that. Saturn is that, planet of structure and organization. Now, I don't think it was conjunct. In fact, where planets are conjunct, I'll try to mention that. But she had Sun and Saturn in Aries. So yeah, they're working together going, I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to figure this out. She also had Sun square Neptune in Cancer. Now that it always intrigues me, especially with somebody in the movies, because Neptune is the movies. Neptune is photography, images, storytelling. So, but also remember Cancer. So, here again, I don't know her whole story. But maybe by being an actress, maybe by doing some of the things she did, it like rubbed her family wrong. Or maybe that was something she really had to work through. Or, and here again, if we really went into depth, I'd research this, and maybe a lot more about her than I do and about the people I'm going to talk about. But the Sun was square Neptune. So, it was automatically like the Sun had a connection to Neptune that it had to work out in this lifetime. Sun was also square Uranus, the planet of individuality. That was sitting in Capricorn. Her Sun was also squared the nodes of the moon in Cancer and Capricorn. So that's what we see too oftentimes, and just an astrological truth. We think we want to see all these positive energies. We want to see all these flows. We want to see trines and sextiles, but it's those squares, those oppositions that often lead to lives that are really notable because we're pushing against something. We're changing something. We're not just, unfortunately, those trines and sextiles can be a little lazy. So maybe sometimes those people don't live up to all their potential. So that's what you're going to see in some of these people too. These squares with the Sun, maybe they had people in their life going, you can't, you won't, and so they go, oh no, you just watch me. So here's Betty Davis. Here's a few things she said. And there are so many more quotes like this. She said, basically, I believe the world is a jungle. I have been uncompromising, peppery, intractable, monomaniacal, tactless, volatile, and oftentimes disagreeable. I suppose I'm larger than life. Another quote, if everybody likes you, you're pretty dull. She said, it's better to be hated for who you are than to be loved for someone you're not. It's a sign of your worth sometimes if you're hated by the right people. And this too sounds so much like Sun in Aries. Success only breeds a new goal. And I like that because once again, Aries is on the run. So, yep, accomplish that. Let's keep going. So to succeed in something only led to another goal. So that's very Sun in Aries. Okay, another person, another actor, Charlie Chaplin. Now, I don't remember his whole story. I remember reading about him one time. I do know that there were definitely some issues, like he was deported from the United States or his movies were banned or something. And there again, it might, if he's a person you like, you might want to go and look at that. But, not like an easy life. There was definitely some push and pull there that was very significant. Or maybe he left the country, he went to England and couldn't get back in or something. But anyway, Charlie Chaplin, Sun and Mercury in Aries. And he had a grand square in his chart in the cardinal signs. Those pushy, aggressive, assertive signs that all start a season. We're talking about Libra and Capricorn and Cancer and Aries. However, what's interesting to me is even though he had the grand square, which means he had lots of planets in those cardinal signs, his grand square did not involve the Sun itself. just so you know. Now, he also, I throw it in there, he had a moon in Scorpio. And um, Neptune in his chart is conjunct Pluto, which means, it's significant transformation and change through his movies, how his movies affected other people. And that was in Gemini, by the way. But I also throw in that moon in Scorpio because, just a little shrouding and mystery, and maybe even being hurt or disappointed or not understanding why some of the things in his life happened to him. Now, I'm just throwing that out really quickly. We're not doing that deep examination. But Charlie Chaplin had some really interesting things to say. In fact, he has a very, very long quote that I wanted to use, but it would literally take several minutes to say. And I thought, you know what, we might use that in a month or so or actually in a few weeks, because he also has something in his chart that it might be perfect for. So we might pull out and use that quote because I've always loved it. It's so interesting. But he said, in the light of our egos, we are all dethroned monarchs. Now, isn't that interesting? Just that idea. We're dethroned monarchs when it comes to our ego. He also says life is a play that does not allow testing. So sing, cry, dance, laugh, and live intensely. Now, that live intensely also probably has to do with that moon in Scorpio. He goes, before the curtain closes and the piece ends with no applause. So do it. He also said it takes courage to make a fool of yourself. So there's one of those fool quotes. Okay, the next person is Gloria Steinem. Outstanding, I don't even like to say women's lib, but, a woman, pressing for equality, etc. So she had Sun conjunct Mars in Aries. So, it's like, yeah, I'm going to upset a few people. I'm going to annoy a few people. That's just what's going to happen. She also, by the way, had Uranus in Aries. So see, she wasn't waiting for any permission. She was going to break through using that fire energy. And I love this quote. She said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. That just sounds so Aries to me. She also said, whatever you want to do, just do it. Making a damn fool of yourself is absolutely essential. There we had that fool idea also. Now, another person, Abraham Maslow. You remember, I don't remember if he was psychiatrist, psychologist, but, famous for his self-actualization. Just changed the psychology world with some of his theories and ideas. He has Sun, Moon, and Saturn in Aries. And his Sun is trine, meaning in a very positive aspect, to Jupiter in Leo. But he too had his Sun square Neptune and the North Node in Cancer, and to Uranus and the South Node in Capricorn. So once again, you see those squares, and fairly important squares, changing. I've got to push up against something, but I'm going to change the world by doing it. So he has so many quotes. It was actually hard to choose, which ones to go with, but I'm going to go with just a couple of today. One can choose to go back towards safety or forward toward growth. Growth must be chosen again and again. Fear must be overcome again and again. He also said, the sacred is in the ordinary. It is to be found in one's daily life, in one's neighbors, friends, and family, in one's own backyard. Travel may be a flight from confronting the scared. This lesson cannot be too easily lost. To be looking elsewhere for miracles is, to me, a sure sign of ignorance that everything is miraculous. Now, I love that too. I'm not sure that that's exactly Aries, but just saying, you know what? It's all in you. It's all in you. What is your passion? What are you being driven to do? And he also said, if you plan on being anything less than you are capable of being, you will probably be unhappy all the days of your life. How about that? Now, Wilbur Wright, one of the Wright brothers, he also had Sun, Mercury, and Neptune in Aries. Mars in Cancer trines Saturn in Scorpio. Now that was important to me because Saturn. What do you get? Where do you get uh, your structure, your organization, your authority? So he had some really interesting things in his chart, including, some connections to both the North and the South Node. So it's almost like destined to come and do something. But he said, I'm an enthusiast, but not a crank, in the sense that I have some pet theories as to the proper construction of a flying machine. I wish to avail myself of all that is already known, and then, if possible, add my might to help on the future worker who will attain final success. I think the truth is, he did not believe that he and his brother were going to fly. He thought he was setting the pace, he was setting the foundation for somebody in the future to do that. And there again, I think you see that in his chart. Now, I do love this one, and I don't know exactly when he said it. I assume he's talking about him and his brother, but he said, we could hardly wait to get up in the morning. And I love that quote because that is so Sun in Aries. I can just hardly wait for the sun to get up because I want to get up. I want to get started. I want to get going. Not the Pisces dreamer. I could just lay in bed all day and just like drift away. No, I can hardly wait to get up in the morning. That is Wilbur Wright. Okay, and I'm looking at that clock and I realize we probably need to save some of these for another week. But Joseph Campbell, the person so into mythology, Sun, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter in Aries. And once again, you know what he's got? Sun square Neptune. That seems to be coming up a lot with some of these people who push their dreams into some kind of manifestation. And I'll just give you one of his. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. So, there you go, guys. Lady Gaga, Sun and Venus in Aries. She has some interesting, and here again, she said, you have to be unique and different, shine in your own way. But she also said, they can't scare me if I scare them first. That's that edginess that we were talking about. Ram Dass, also the Sun tightly conjunct Uranus and the North Node in Aries. David Letterman, Sun and Mars in Aries. And his only quote that I'm going to give is, sometimes something worth doing is worth overdoing. Now that sounds like Sun and Aries and a little bit different than what we've been talking about. And of course, I put this in the Power Peak. Actor William Shatner has Sun, Mercury, Uranus, and the North Node of the Moon in Aries. So it is not a surprise. It is not shocking at all that he really became the iconic captain of the Starship Enterprise. In the Star Trek series, where they say, explore new worlds, seek out new life and civilizations, and boldly go where no one has gone before. That's exactly, he lived his chart in his work. So I know we need to wrap up, so I'm going to go a little fast, but I just want you, as a wrap, this week we are standing on the precipice of daring new adventures. And it may sound like exaggeration, but just in case it's not, here's a few tips. Now, these are also in the Power Peak, but dare to challenge yourself and your ideas, because we need to break out with Uranus. We need to break out of some of the things that we're doing. We need to be running down that yellow brick road. We need to take a risk. We need to feel like we're alive and fresh and responsive. And on that note, one of the things I put is, one of the points is, personal dogma can be dangerous if we don't keep it fresh, if we don't allow new experiences to change what we believe and what we think is the way to live our lives. Aries doesn't want to follow the rules. Aries wants to create new rules. So follow your creativity and your passions. Fan the flames of brilliance and illumination in your life. Be curious. Pull a thread. Follow a thread. See a pattern. See where it goes. But also, there's this sense, and I'm not quite sure where this came from, but I just say, don't resist the temptation to reinvent the wheel. When there's expertise out there, go for it. Go get that expertise. Learn from other people and be willing to share your expertise with other people. Maybe that's the collaborativeness that we're seeing both in the new moon and in the spring equinox charts, where these planets are all working together. So they're saying everybody doesn't have to go out and do it themselves. Let's pool our information. Let's pool our resources. Let's figure out how we can do this ourselves. But certainly remember to pace yourself. This is energy that can just burn you out really quickly. So pay attention to your body. Know when you really need to replenish your body and your spirit. But more than anything else, just have some fun. Aries is this little kid. Like I said, he's running around in a red baseball cap. Okay. All right, guys, that's it for today. We just have to close the show. I know that my producer Serena is wonderful. Thank you, Serena. She's got to go on and produce Kelly's show, so we need to get moving. And like I said, if there's details that you want, you'll probably find them in Mark's Power Peak. So go subscribe to that. But heads up for next week. Mostly what we have next week are some really, really interesting interactions between planets, and they're mixing it up in Aries, as you can imagine, with all those planets sitting there. So please plan to join me next week. And thanks for joining me today. And there again, thanks to Serena for being such a wonderful producer. And stay tuned, because she will be producing Kelly Whetstone, who's coming up next on Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone. You'll find it on 12radio.com and also on her YouTube channel of that same name. Now, here's a quote of the week. And this is Diana Ross, Sun and Mercury in Aries, and also some really interesting, there again, combinations of the Sun with Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. Exactly what we've been talking about here. She said, you can't just sit there and wait for people to give you that golden dream. You've got to get out there and make it happen for yourself. It takes a long time to be a diva. I mean, you got to work for it. So that's Diana Ross closing the show. This is CA signing out. You can find me for personal sessions on 12listen.com. Please feel free to request a schedule call at a time that's good for you. You have been listening to Everyday Astrology with CA Brooks here on YouTube and also on 12radio.com. And just thank you so much for being here today, because we are changing the way that we listen to the world together.